Okay, so I am back at the studio now, getting ready to do this May flowers is what I call this one. I actually was inspired to create this based on my son's happy little flower picture that he drew me. I should have brought it with me so you guys could see it. It's real similar to what this is and very whimsical and has like this happy little face on it. So I decided to make my own version of that and give him a little friend. Um, so the one thing that I really want you guys to keep in mind here is that you can do this however you want. So if you want your background to be a different color besides gray, I went real neutral on this one, but I have made this one before with like a brighter blue background and brighter more vivid colors in the flower. Totally up to you. Okay, remember, you are the only person who has to love this when you're done. So you make the choices, and that's what's so great about it. So this is what we're going to end up with. Right now, I just have a blank canvas. So some other things that you're going to need, you'll have your supply list, but I'm just going to kind of tell you again what I've got here. I've got a couple paintbrushes, pair of scissors. I would recommend small scissors for you if you have small hands. These can be kind of clunky to maneuver. I have a gel pen, which actually looks like there's hardly any ink left in this. So odds are I'm going to have to go get another gel pen when we come to this step at the very, very end. I have my matte medium, which this I know I've said before is my favorite, the Liquitex matte gel. You can use Mod Podge. If you do, I also recommend matte for that so it doesn't have like a super glossy, shiny finish when you're done. Golden makes one also, but this one is my favorite. Have an assortment of paint colors. They're all gray, surprisingly. And then I've got some white. So I've got a couple different kinds of gray and some white. These are just cheap craft paints. You can get these at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Dick Blick, I think carries something similar. You can get nicer ones, of course, but you don't have to. These work great. Now, a couple of other things I have, my template, which yours will probably be a little bit prettier than this, and my words, and some other little fun things that we're going to get to as we go. So why don't we just go ahead and dive right in, get started. Now, the fun thing about this project is we're going to use something different on the background. You can use anything flat that will go. I mean, newspaper, I wouldn't recommend because it's going to be really acidic. And when you go to glue it on, it's going to smear. All that ink is going to just smear. You know how when you touch a newspaper, which you guys probably have never even done, your hands get all dirty. So I would stay away from that. Magazine pages also don't go down quite as well. Book pages are great. Sheet music, great. And the other thing you can use is pattern paper. You could glue a big chunk of this down if you wanted to. Any kind of pattern paper works great. I'm going to do kind of a combo on this one. I'm going to do a little bit of everything. So you can rip these, you can tear them, you can, cut them nicely. Totally up to you what you decide to do with it. I like to cut mine. I think I'm going to try to use only one piece of book paper. So your very first step is just to cut the margins off so that all you have left are these words. So you're just going to cut all the white part off so that you don't have to worry about it. So then, if you have a page that doesn't have, like if you had this page where it's like the start of a chapter, just flip it over and use the back. You can use any kind of book page for this. I would not cut up a book that like your mom's been waiting to read. I don't advise that. Otherwise, you should be fine. So I'm just going to do a couple pieces. I may end up having another one. We'll see. I don't want these to be too perfect. Now, one of the other things I'm going to do is I'm sort of going to mix and match some pattern paper here in the background. And I kind of want to keep it fairly neutral because I'm going to go for a real neutral with mine. You don't have to do that. If you're making a purple background, it's a great idea to use some pattern paper that has some purple in it or pink, whatever you decide to do. I'm going to do this gray and white kind of motif. So I'm totally good with this. Now I'm just going to cut these in some like simple, easy rectangles. Just going to kind of lay them out. This is kind of like having a puzzle. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut the edges off of this just in case I want to sort of pad the pattern paper with book paper. I I think maybe I might like to have a little bit more. The page just turned out to be a little bit smaller than I thought. You know, another thing that works really well is sheet music. I have an old hymnal. A lot of churches don't use hymnals anymore. And so I have a friend who works at a church, and she got me a couple hymnals that they were getting ready to throw away. Still to this day, one of my favorite things, and I'm really stingy with it, which is kind of interesting that you'd be stingy with a hymnal. Shouldn't I give that away? I don't know. But I am a little stingy with it. So I don't want these to be all exactly the same size. So I'm just cutting them a little bit different. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to cut this one. So any book will work, any page will work. And we're just going to kind of start to build onto this any sort of background that you like, okay? It does not have to be anything special because you're going to cover it up with paint, but I like to keep it kind of all in the same color family. So this is sort of all neutral. And that's just for the sake of making it easier. Now, your goal here is to cover up all of the white of the canvas. And I like to kind of mix up how big or small my pieces are so that they're not all the same. Totally fine to overlap them. The other thing you have to remember here is you're going to end up taking these off and gluing them down, so you don't have to be too precise about it at this point. This is a great time to use up scraps. You're just going to put, like, you know, it's almost like you're hinting. You're going to have hints of color behind your painting when you're done. Because if you'll notice here, just look at the background. You're not really seeing what's back there, but you just want it to be a little bit interesting, right? So just keep laying that on. I actually really love this step. It's kind of fun. It's sort of like creating, I don't know, like a real, like it's like taking all these different patterns that are different, but a little bit related and making a new background, making a new pattern out of them, which is, I think, really interesting and really kind of fun. So I'm going to kind of mix it up and do a couple bigger pieces. Turn some of them sideways, turn some of them, and you know what? You could do really big pieces. You could do all book paper. You could do all sheet music in the background. There's no rule here. There's no right or wrong here, which is what is so great about it. I'm just gonna kind of lay it out there how I'm seeing it, and you know what? Just play around with it until you like it. That is what is the best part. I mean, that's where all the fun comes in, right? You get to just sort of make up your own rules. Art should be fun. There should be no stress. When you're painting, when you're creating, that is what I love so much about making art with my kids. I think they kind of remind me to just go with your first, whatever your first instinct is, and just do it. You know, you may look at this and go, I don't want to do that. So try something else. Totally. It's all good. Whatever you like, whatever you think works, change it up. This is your artwork. Okay, so that means it is all your decision, which is kind of awesome, don't you think? And you know what? You may do it and you may hate it, and then the next time you do it a little different. And that's totally fine too. I can't tell you how many times I've discarded thrown away a piece that I thought I was going to love so much, and I've been like, oh my gosh, that just did not turn out. I don't like that at all. It happens all the time. I would bet it happens to just about everybody who does this sort of thing. Okay, so you're just going to kind of arrange these. And right now, I just want to make sure that I've got enough paper to cover up what I'm doing. I'm not worried about them being perfect. I'm not worried about making sure that it's all, you know, like right here. I'm not going to worry about that so much because I know when I go to glue it down, I'm going to have to move it anyway. So I'm not so concerned about making sure that everything lays out nice and perfect. So fits perfectly there. Look at that. And you know, I've got it kind of layered on. It's kind of nice. And I'm a big fan of using whatever you've got. So if you have book paper at home and your mom says, you know what, I read this book, I hated it, take it and tear it up, go for it. Then the book gets a new life. If it happens to be a book I wrote, don't tear it up. Just kidding. I've actually done this with my own books before too, so all books are fair game. Okay, so that works. So now you see how I've got it kind of laid out. So now I know, and you know what, you could do this like as you're gluing. You could start gluing and just start cutting at the same time. I personally like to have it all kind of laid out for me. Okay, I know what I've got. I know how much I need. I don't have to cut anything else. This step is done. So I'm going to go ahead, excuse me, and get my gel medium. Matte gel, again, I love it because it's, man, you can just, when this dries, you can do anything on it. You can use your pen, your charcoal pencil. It's just perfect. I find that with other gel mediums and Mod Podge and stuff, it's just not quite as nice. So I'm right-handed, so I'm turning this a little bit to the side. Hopefully that's okay. Now the next step is to start gluing this down. So what I always do, I just kind of pick stuff up and move it out of the way. And I work one piece at a time. So I go little bits at a time because I remember exactly where this was, and then I know it's going to fit there. So you're going to paint that glue or that Mod Podge or that gel medium right onto your canvas. This is a lot easier than trying to put paint on the back of every single piece of paper. I do not advise that. It'll take you forever. So you stick it down and then you put a coat over top of it. And it's going to want to move. It's going to slide around a little bit. Just be real careful. You might have to put it back once or twice. No big deal. I don't actually remember what order these all go in. I'm going to just pretend that I do. And it's fine if it's not exactly the way you laid it out initially. That's not a big deal. Okay, so you're just going to work your way around, and every single piece gets a coat on the bottom, set it down, and then a coat on the top. And the reason is because, like right now, I don't want to set this right next to this. I want to overlap it a little bit. And that's because then all of my background is getting covered up. All of this canvas is getting covered up. So I put the coat over top of this piece so that when I lay this down, it's not dry underneath it. Because watch, if I go to glue this down and this doesn't have any glue on it, it's just going to be, it's going to stick up there. It's not going to, it's going to be dry there, and there'll be a bubble and you'll end up hating it. That's where then the background would start to come apart. So the other thing I will tell you is when you do this, if you use Mod Podge or whatever you decide to use, don't be stingy with it. You kind of have to practice a little bit to figure out how much you need on your brush. And the reason is because sometimes if it's too goopy, it will not dry. It takes forever to dry. So you don't want it to be too much. You don't want to have big puddles of glue, right? So you want to be careful not to do that, but at the same time, you have to get enough to where it sticks down. And if you start to get bubbles underneath, that means you didn't get enough glue underneath. So right here, I can already tell that's like completely dry under there. So I just peel it back, stick it down, and then put a coat over top, okay? So I'm gonna do this all the way until my background is completely covered. All right, I'm going to work my way around, and then I'm going to put a coat around. I'm going to show you just one more little line to make sure that you guys got it. Again, I'm just going to layer it on. Usually what happens to me is I set the whole thing up. It's perfect. I know that every single piece of my background is going to be covered. And then I go to put it back down, and I do something in the wrong place, and then I have to cut more paper. I have no idea how that happens, but it happens regularly. So if that happens to you, it is not a big deal. Just get yourself some more, no big deal. Okay, the other thing, if you want a piece of paper underneath another piece of paper, for some reason, these do not all have to be in a perfect line. In fact, I like it better when they aren't in a perfect line. But if you want it in a perfect line, or you want it to be like, you want to see more of this and less book paper, glue this down on top of the other one. So this would not be your background piece if you wanted to do that. So you do maybe like this. And actually, you'd like, let's stick that in my mouth for a second. You stick that down, and then you do a coat over top, right? Because everything gets a coat on the bottom and a coat on the top. And then you would put this down. So just be aware of that, because anything you put down first is going to be underneath the other things that you're putting down, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up. I'm going to pause for a second for you guys so that you don't have to watch me do this whole thing. But when I'm done, you will see that the background is covered with a coat on the bottom and a coat on the top. Okay, so remember I told you what would happen when I was done, and it absolutely happened. You'll notice I have a big hole right in the middle that's not covered, and I have a piece here that didn't come together. Now, I just want to explain to you guys that when you're working on this, you're going to come around to things where all of a sudden you've moved it a little bit farther one way or another, and so it doesn't go down the way that it's supposed to, or the way that you originally had it. And that is totally fine. It is no big deal. You just keep adding a little bit more paper. That's why you don't want to like put your paper all away thinking, I've got it. I've already marked out everything that I need, because guess what? Sometimes it doesn't work that way. So this one was long and skinny. I don't have a long and skinny spot left. So I actually just pulled it. I just tore it in half is what I did. And then I'm going to put a little bit more book paper here. Sometimes I put book paper upside down. So I almost never lay it this way, but I will put it upside down, because you know nobody needs to read it. That's not really the point of putting it there. And then I think I'm going to put one more little piece of pattern paper down here. And it's amazing because you guys saw I blocked the whole thing off, and I still ended up with a big gap for some reason. I have no idea why that happens, except that I just move things a little bit more. Just don't panic if that happens to you. It's no big deal. Okay, so now what I want to do, I'm trying to think here. The next step that I need to do, I'm going to put this away. I actually need to dry my background, and you'll hear me say that a lot in this whole art camp, is that we have to dry our background to move on to the next step. If you were in one of my workshops, I would let this dry for a little while you cut the next pieces out. But so if you don't have a heat gun, which is like this, or you can find them where they look like little hair dryers. If you don't have one, just set this aside and move on to the next step. Okay, it's no big deal. If you do have a heat gun, just go ahead and dry it right now. So I'm just going to show you real quick how this works. You just turn it on, you put it right onto your background. These are actually like embossing guns, and they're used a lot in rubber stamping, and I think for impatient artists like me who just don't want to wait around for stuff to dry. Now the thing about the glue is if you sit on one section of your background for too long, the glue will start to bubble up. And so you kind of have to keep it moving, and you don't want to get too close to it, and you definitely don't want to get your fingers underneath it. Okay? I would say your best bet is to make sure that your mom is okay with you using it, but I will tell you, in my art workshops, I have 8- and 9-year-old girls who have no problem doing this. I think as long as you say, it'll burn you, they're pretty careful. So just be careful with it. If you have it. If you do not, no big deal. Just set it off to the side and you can do the next step. My heat gun's starting to smell like it needs to be put out to pasture. It's stinky. And then you should usually notice, like, when you put your glue on top, you might think it's going to stay cloudy the whole time. It doesn't. It dries clear. I will say if you glop it on too much and it's too puddly, it might still be a little bit cloudy. It's very hard to dry that. So then just run your fingers over it. You'll be able to tell if there's a little sticky part here. I'm just going to let it dry by itself. Some of it's a little sticky over here, but I think it'll be okay. Usually you can tell just by holding it up into the light. Oh yeah, there's a little bit there that still looks shiny. And if it's shinier than the rest, it's still wet. But no big deal, just set it off to the side. And now what I want you to do is find your template. Mine is very basic, and this is just a guideline. Flowers are not difficult, right? Sorry, I had to get a drink of water. Flowers are not hard to make. And so if you find that you want to make your own version of these flowers, oh my goodness, feel free to do that. You may hate the way my flowers look. You may want to do you may love it, but you just may want to do kind of your own thing with the flowers. Go for it. I strongly encourage you to do that. The great thing too is this mixed media, these backgrounds, you can do this on canvases, on canvas panels, which are a little bit less expensive. And that's a great way to just buy some of those when they're on sale. And then you can stock up and practice all kinds of stuff. Watercolor paper will do to a degree, but it will fold up a little bit. But if you just want to practice, and there's also mixed media pads, like big, like sketch pads that are great for this sort of experimentation. I cannot stress enough how important that is and how fun it is. It does not have to be perfect when you're done with it. So just play. This is all about playing. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to cut out our flower and our petals. And the way that I do these little templates is I just go ahead and cut around the piece that you need first. The great kind of whimsical thing about this may drive some of you guys nuts. The whimsical aspect of this comes in, I just like to cut away this. Just cut that away. You don't need it right now. Set that aside. Don't lose it. It's not going anywhere. The great whimsical part of this, what makes it interesting, is that it's not perfect. So you're just going to go ahead and cut around this circle. This is this hand-drawn circle. It is not a perfect circle. You absolutely could use a perfect circle. If you want your flower to look perfect, go for it. Okay? Totally fine. I do not. I love that my circle is not perfect. In fact, I would probably even make it a little bit wonkier if I could, and I might. We'll see what it looks like when I'm done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a piece of pattern paper here that I love. Now, there's a trick to mixing pattern papers. And let me tell you what it is. So pretend you've got, I'm going to use these for my petals. This is one of my favorite colors. I love it. And it goes really well with the gray. So I already know I want to use these. These are my petals. And I pretend that I also want to use some yellow. Now, you have to be careful not to get too crazy busy with big, huge patterns all at the same time. In little doses, these patterns might go really well together. But, you know, and say you throw in this too, like this section right here, because you really like the flowers. But here's the thing, this, once you're done with it, because you're just taking pieces of it, it's gonna look too busy. The trick here is to almost use patterns that look like solids, okay? So let me show you what I mean. This one, this yellow, is a very, you can see, it's a pattern. It's got a really light polka dot in it, and somebody drew on it too, but this is a great little scrap piece. I don't need a big piece. So there's a little bit of pattern in here. So when I hold it away, doesn't it just kind of look like a yellow piece of paper? And that's what you want. You want something that does not look super, super busy, okay? Really, same with this. I mean, it's kind of busy. It's probably the busiest of all the patterns I'll use. But since these are all the same colors, there's not like a pink background with a bunch of flowers on it of different colors. It's nice for the eye to rest on. So when you're picking out colors for this, like I wouldn't probably do this section of flowers for the inside of my flowers. It's just too much. It's too busy. But part of this whole joy of this is picking out your own pattern paper. So I'm going to start with this pink. I'm just going to want to, this would be another great pink. Let me show you. So see how that's kind of subtle? It's just two different tones of pink. So it's nice and easy. So what I want to do is I want to turn this over, because if you turn it over, then you can put all of your pencil or pen marks on the back side of the paper. Okay, so if you're not comfortable cutting, I have all this paint on my hands already. Before I even started this project, I had paint on my hands. So you're just going to outline it really simply. Doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to cut it out anyway. Set this aside. You're not done with it. Okay, but now I know where my guideline is, and after I cut it out, take your time cutting it out, okay, guys? It does not, you don't want it to be sloppy. You know, you could very, very easily have super fast cut marks, and I think you'll regret it. Take pride in this work, because when you're all done with it, you want to have something that you really, really love and that's really, really special to you. Now notice there's no pen marks because I turned it over, which is the great thing about this. Okay, so now I'm done with the pink. I'm going to set that aside. Now I know that I want the interior of my flower to be yellow. And the interior one is just, you're going to cut on the very next line. So you're done with this outside line. So you can just go in and cut around. Just take your time. You're not in a hurry. That's the beautiful thing about making art. You can just kind of veg out a little bit when you're doing some of this stuff. You don't even have to think. It's so nice. Turn some fun, happy music on. Maybe it's like raining. We've had so much rain lately, so it's been really, really hard to be motivated to do anything other than like sit and drink coffee, which I know none of you probably do. Okay, so I want to use, again, this is a piece of scratch paper that obviously somebody else has already used, but I'm going to turn it over, trace around it, probably using up the very last of the ink in this pen because it looks like it is just dead. Okay. Again, take your time cutting it out, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It does not have to be the most beautiful circle ever in the history of circles. You know, if you've got like a Cricut machine or a die cutting machine, feel free to use that if you want. I actually really love that my circles look a little bit imperfect, so I probably wouldn't. But you may love it, and plus it would probably be a lot quicker. You could do a ton of these and give them out as gifts. These would make great teacher gifts, or if you've got, you know, a children's pastor, or a grandma, or just somebody who would just love to have this. Just make a bunch of them. Okay, now I want to show you something else. So I have to cut out this inner circle. So this is the last piece of the big flower. And if you feel confident, if you don't, turn it over. Or actually you would cut this out first and you would trace around it. But if you feel confident with your scissors, what you can do is set this right onto your pattern paper and hold it in place, okay? And actually, I always cut away the excess, so I'm not trying to like manage that at all. And I'm just gonna go in here and cut this right out at the same time. I'm just really careful to hold this. I don't move my fingers at all. And then when I do, I just take it and flip it around. But if you're not comfortable with this, do exactly with this little circle what we just did with the bigger circle. You cut out the template, turn it over, trace it right onto the back of the pattern paper, okay? And you're done with those. You don't need those templates anymore, okay? So now I've got 3 whimsical floral insides, which is kind of fun. So I'm just kind of preparing this. I'm not worried about getting everything perfect at this point. Okay, now here's the other thing. Your little flower, you do not feel like you have to do this exactly like mine. But let me think for 1 second. I want to make sure that I don't tell you the wrong thing, because this is my only template. So what I want to do, I'm actually, you know what, you guys, I'm going to wait to do this little flower. I'm going to move on to the next step, and I'm just going to set that aside for right now. So you don't need that quite yet. Okay, but you've got these cut out, set them aside, and you know what, look, oh, look, it's already dry. It actually probably won't be. If you don't use a heat gun, it probably won't be dry yet. The glue just takes a really long time to dry. But since I had a heat gun, mine is dry. So what I'm going to do, moving on to the next step and leaving the rest of the paper in just for a couple of minutes, we'll come right back to it. I want to put my light gray background onto this beautiful foundation that I've created. Now remember, when you do this, you do not want I don't want those paints. I don't know why those are even here. You do not want to cover up everything that you just did. So you don't want a really thick coat of paint. You just want to do it nice and light. So I've got this light gray here with a lot of like little extra pieces that are dried in there. And shake it up before you do it because it likes to settle and be weird. And then you end up with like these, oh my goodness, sometimes it's kind of gross. If it's really old paint, it'll be like juicy and it's just kind of nasty. Okay, so you're just gonna drip paint on there. You might want your mom to help you with this because if your paint doesn't come out right away and you go to like squeeze it really hard, it will ruin it won't ruin it because you can usually scoop it off, but I mean you'll waste a lot of paint. So just be really careful not to do too much. So you can see I didn't do a ton. There's just little drips here and there and I might have to add more, but that's okay. I can always add more. Get a piece of cardstock or a business card or something with a little bit of substance to it. You don't want to use a piece of paper to do this. Although I will tell you, you can spread paint with just about anything. You can spread paint with a paintbrush, your fingers, an old credit card. You can spread paint with a paper towel, tin foil. So get creative about that too. The effect's going to be different, but I like to just use a piece of cardstock. And what I do, I just scrape it on down. And then I go in the other direction. I get my edges pretty good. I like to make sure that my edges are covered really well. Just turn it around. Now you'll notice, you can still see, like you're gonna pick up a lot of paint here. Just dab that right back on. And you'll notice you can still see quite a bit underneath. Okay, so when I'm done, that's what I've got. You may look at it and say, you know what? I'd like to have a little more paint than that. No problem. So pretend that I really wanted to put, and you got to remember, you're going to cover some of this up because of your flower. But if you want to, feel free to add a little bit more. Okay. So now this is going to dry. So again, I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun and I'm going to dry this and then I will be right back. Okay, so this is dry. My whole background, the paint dries really, really fast compared to glue. So it's a lot easier to get that dry, but it is completely dry now, which is good because you don't want to go on to the next step until that background is dry. Just don't forget that. So this is what I have so far, right? I've got my background done, I've got my paint on it, and I've got these 3 pieces of my flower cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the stem and the leaf for each of my flowers. Now here's the thing, I do not have a stem on your template. You know why? Because it is, let me show you how hard it is to cut it. Literally, all you're going to do is cut a chunk of paper as skinny or as wide as you want. Now I feel like this is a little bit wide for me, so I'm going to go ahead and just chop that up, just slim it down a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just trying to kind of build it, see what it's going to look like, see what I like, see what I don't like. And for the smaller one, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. It's obviously just going to be smaller, but you don't have to have it perfect because your flower is going to go over top of it. So if you'll notice, this is a lot longer than what I've actually got here because your flower can come all the way down there if you want it to. So don't feel like you have to cut it off at the perfect spot, okay? All right, so then the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to take my template, and this was just my preference because I was trying to keep everything super neutral and because I'm using this sort of teal blue for the flower petals. I didn't want to use green for my stem and for my leaf. So I decided to use this brown color, which is strange because you're never going to find a flower in real life that has this brown color for a stem and a leaf. But that's the great thing about art. You can just kind of make it up however you want to. So don't feel like you have to be super precise and literal. It does not have to be, and I do this a lot, you guys. I sit there and think, you would never see a brown stem. I can't do brown. I would never see a pink bird. I can't do a pink bird, you know, and it does not matter. You just go right ahead and do a pink bird. Go right ahead and do a brown stem. If it looks pretty with your page, if it looks like that's what your canvas is supposed to look like, dude, do it. That's what I say. What's the worst that can happen? You end up not liking it and you have to start over. That is the worst that can happen. But you should have fun along the way. All right, I feel like this leaf that I'm giving you guys is a tiny bit small. That's just me. And then this one is going to go over here. So once again, the way you use the template, it's almost like a stencil. Turn it over. Take it. Does not matter which way the actual template is because the leaf can go either way. Trace around it. Now look how sloppy my tracing is. I really don't care because the reason is because I'm going to cut it out anyway. So it's my cuts that need to look nice. It's not this, no one's going to see this. So as long as I know that I'm going to be really careful when I'm actually cutting this out, we're good to go. Okay, so then I have my leaf that goes on the left. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but let me show you again, just to remind you. One thing you can do, cut out, and this is what I would do here. I only need about that much of this paper. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to mess with all of this while I'm cutting. I can't tell you how many years I cut tiny little pieces like this with all of this hanging off the side. And then I was like, wait, I can just cut this off. Now, if you feel like your leaf is too small, which I actually kind of feel like mine is, but I'm just going to go with it. Just cut a little bit outside that line and then it'll make it a little bit bigger. Fatten it up a little. So you see it's not the same size exactly because I wanted my leaf to be a little bit bigger. I don't know if I think I want it like that. Okay. And there again, a leaf, I mean, basically the leaf is just, you're just going to take, if you want to do a new one, just do 2 semicircles, like an eyeball or an almond. If you don't like the ones that I've done for you guys, do your own. Totally. I will not be offended. I will love it. Okay. So the next thing that I want to show you guys is I think we would be better off to do the small one next and then do the petals. The reason is because the petals are sort of like the background where you kind of get this little puzzle and you think you have enough and then you have to cut more. And so it can be a little bit tricky that way. I'm sitting at our studio and this rabbit just flew across the window. I have no idea where it was going, but it was obviously in a hurry, like Alice in Wonderland. Okay, so I know that the background of my flower, this curved piece with all the little scallops, is going to be this green color. Okay, now here's the other thing I want to tell you guys. When you are using this pattern paper, you kind of want these two flowers to be buddies. Okay, they should look somewhat alike. They don't have to be exact mirrors of each other. Maybe the second flower, this little one, it's more about the yellow, or the pink is small and the yellow is big. Totally, totally fine. The other thing is you don't have to follow my scallops exactly. But if you want to, you can go ahead and cut them out of their template, turn it over, trace around it, and cut it out. Same way that we've been doing. Every single piece is the same. Or you might want to do it like this. I've got a piece that's big enough, just like this. Again, this does not have to be super precise. Oops. Now with scallops, if you're a little bit older, you may be able to do this. If you're a little bit younger, you might need a little bit of help, okay? Do not panic if you can't get this exactly the way that you want it. But if you'll notice, I am moving the hand that does not have the scissors. My scissor hand is pretty steady. This is the trick to cutting nice, clean lines on curves. I guess they wouldn't be lines, would they? Nice clean curves. Okay, so, and you can go down farther if you want to like Make them a little more whimsical. They can be a little bit funky. That's why I really want you guys to play around with this yourself. Don't feel like your flowers have to look like mine. Now, if you're a boy, if you have boys in your home, they may reject the flowers, but I will tell you, my boys will make them for me or for my mom. So don't only think, oh, that's a flower. I'm not making a flower. Think, who can I make a flower and who for? Who can I give this to? It's better than a bouquet, okay? It's better than flowers that might die in another week. This artwork you're making will live on forever. So then see, I've got this little scalloped piece, which is just basic, gonna go on the background. Now see here again, I have a really long stem. I could put it right at the top of the stem, but I kind of want him to be down here. I want him to be hanging out down here a little bit. I don't want him to be up too high because I'm gonna still have all these petals to add to the background. And to be totally honest with you, I have to move this over because the petals, I've got to leave room for my petals, okay? So now, same thing, you've got this centerpiece. And I'm going to do it, I'm going to kind of mirror mine the way that I did the big flower. I'm going to do the little flower. Do the same exact thing. But let's do this, just so I can remind you guys. If you want to trace it and you don't feel comfortable cutting it while you are holding both your pattern paper and your template, you just go ahead and cut the circle right out of your template. You're done with it. Good to go. And if you're not, you can always print out another one. That's the great thing. Okay, so now I'm going to take my piece of pink. I'm going to turn it over. I really should have had a garbage. Can you guys see all my garbage over here? You know, on like, I don't know if your mom ever watches Rachel Ray or if you ever watch Rachel Ray, but she has that garbage bowl in the kitchen where she just throws all the garbage right into it, which I think is so clever. And I don't really know if you need to dirty up another bowl just for garbage. Maybe you don't, but I think it's brilliant. I mean, yes, totally do. I should have a garbage bowl on my table is what I'm saying. Okay, so here again, I'm going to cut out so I have a smaller piece. I almost forgot to do this. And I noticed right away because it was really kind of annoying. You don't want to get too much bigger. You want to kind of stay on the lines because if you get too big, then you're not going to show any of the scallops. And I want to see those cute little scallops behind coming on the outside. So your circle can't be too much bigger than what's on the template. And that's why you have it. The other thing you can do is you can kind of make up your own circles. You do not have to follow these patterns at all. Do not feel like you are a slave to these patterns and these templates. You're totally not. Okay, so then if you're feeling confident, you go right ahead. Do your inside one. And you are short one circle. And I think that's totally, oh no, you're not. It's right here. I lied. We'll do that one in a second. Okay, and then your last circle. And here again, you guys, I just drew this. If you have circle punches that are different sizes, you could totally use them. But do not feel obligated. The other thing that's really great, if you are particular, okay, pretend you're particular. I want to show you something. Pretend you really hate my circles because they are, oh my goodness, they're not perfect. You're driving me bonkers. Take something like this that is a circle and go right ahead. This is almost the same size actually. And trace around it. Again, you're going to cut, so it's not going to be perfect. But you may have, if you don't like the circles that are on your template, look around your house. That was a little wonky, but you can use a nickel, you can use a quarter, you can use a dime, a penny. Probably a pencil is better than the pen I'm using, but my pencil fell on the floor and now I can't find it. Okay, so I know that the last piece is going to be pink, and I actually think this is a little big. I want to see more of that yellow because I love this yellow. I love the yellow piece. So when I cut my pink, I'm actually going to cut it a little bit smaller than what's there. So now look, I hardly have to use any of that pattern paper. This is why I have a hard time throwing scraps away, because so often you're going to use these tiny, tiny little scraps. And it's like, oh my goodness, I could have used that. I didn't mean to throw it away. I always feel like if I throw something away the next day, I'm like, why did I do that? I need it. So I'm just going to cut it a little bit skinnier than normal. I'm going to cut like right on the inside of that line. So it's not a huge difference. You're not going to notice a huge difference. But then I can see. Now here's the other thing. You do not have to make these perfect. You can have them offset a little bit. They don't have to be perfectly centered in the middle. You can put them off to the side if you like them to be like that. They're wonky flowers. That's the whole point. I really feel that's weird. Okay, I like it. Okay, so now the last step. Now here's the other thing. Oh, the rabbit's back. I know you guys can't see the rabbit, but it freaks me out every time I look up and there it is. Here's the thing. When you do this, it's important, like a lot of times when I do art workshops, people are like, kids are like, can I start gluing? Can I please start gluing? And you could, but you're going to regret it because I'll tell you why. You have to glue your petals down first. But I feel like you can cut out all these other pieces first and it's just easier. Okay? So don't start gluing yet. The great thing about these templates is they are made to go on these specific canvases. And so you want to make sure that everything fits exactly where you have it. Because when you start building your design onto the background of your canvas, sometimes it's really easy to have them not leave enough room. And then, oh my goodness, this piece of paper is hanging off the side. And that is not what you want. It never works to have a piece of paper hanging off the side. Okay, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have no idea why I cut this out. I think maybe it was just in case you needed another middle. Okay, so if you would rather cut that one out, feel free. Petals. These petals can be as similar or as different as you want. All they are semicircles. So you may not even have to cut them out of here. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this without even using them. If you want to use them, cut them out exactly like we did the other things. Okay, you're just going to cut just like this. And then you've got your little template for your petals. The trick with these petals, you don't want them all to be the same size. You want to have a couple different sizes. The other thing you could do is if you had a circle punch, you could punch a bunch of them and cut them in half. And that would work too, depending on how big they are. I would use bigger and smaller. Okay, so now here I've got a straight edge on my pattern paper, right? So I know that I want the straight edge because I don't need to cut a whole circle. It would just be wasteful because I'm going to stick so much of it underneath the pink anyway that I don't need to do that. So what I do is I just start cutting. And the trick is to make sure, see, and I don't feel like that's even big enough. So I'm going to go bigger now. Make sure that you turn all the way in so that you're cutting that whole part. So you're going to have like some very different looking pieces, and that's actually what you want. You don't want them all to be the same. Some of them can be longer and skinnier. Some of them can be wider. Some of them are going to move as soon as you put down the piece next to them. This is why this little puzzle that you're putting together now can be kind of challenging. So just play with it until you get it the way that you like. You can mix smaller ones and bigger ones. And then I want to show you something else that you can do. They do not all have to be the same. I think I need some small pieces. Again, I'm not moving my scissors. I am moving the other hand, the paper in the other hand. And here again, you're just kind of getting an idea of where you want it. Doesn't have to be exact because if you're anything like me, it'll probably change some anyway. And the kind of cool thing is when these don't end up looking perfect. That is really what you want. See, I've got too much paper here for my own good. Okay, so you're just going to keep doing this. Now let me show you something that makes this a little bit easier. So I'm at the end. I'm just going to trim this off because I want to keep that straight edge, right? I want to still have a straight edge on there. Well, let me show you something. So I know I'm going to cut a bunch more scallops on this. So what you can do, hopefully I can do this without moving everything. You can fold your paper in half. I'm sure you guys have done this in school. And then you're going to end up with 2 for the price of 1. Okay, so now I've got this little scallop here. I'm going to cut it in half right on the fold. I'm just going to go right down there. And then I put them away from each other so they don't look exactly the same. Okay, so you can do that. Another thing you can do is while it's still folded, cut that little fold off. Now you've got 2 separate pieces. It's kind of nifty. I am all about pulling double duty on this stuff, making it work for me. So another thing you could do is you could just cut off the fold, the edge right there, so they don't stay connected. But then as you cut, nice and careful. Just kind of see what you've got there. It just sounded really Midwestern. See what you got there. Apparently I have an accent. I didn't know it. And then just keep cutting. Okay, so you're just going to keep doing this until your whole flower is covered. And you don't even have, you could just keep cutting out, cut a bunch of different sizes so that you, see, I am so picky about not having those, those extra pieces of paper. They're driving me nuts. The extra chunk of paper is driving me nuts. So I'm just going to get a little stockpile here. And this would be a great way to start in the first place. Like, just go ahead and cut out a bunch. The trick though is don't cut so many that you end up with a bunch left over unless you're planning to make another flower, which you totally can if you want to. So now I've kind of got my choice of different sizes. And now I've got some extras in case I end up needing them, which you know me, there's a really good chance I will. Okay, so now they come together. And you know what, when I'm putting these down with the glue, I may end up putting them down a little bit closer. So that may make a big difference. You know what? I know what. You guys, I messed something up. I don't know if you remember when I said I didn't understand what this was for. And I've been looking at this flower trying to figure out what in the world. And this is fine. You can leave this if you want to. But I really want a little bit bigger pink for that center. Now I am all about looking at something and saying, I don't like this. I don't like the way that this looks. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more. So if you cut that, this one, and you love it, leave it. It's totally fine. But if you're like me and you feel like it just needs to be, you know what, it is the same size. I feel like it needs to be bigger than that. Personally, I'm wanting to have one that is just a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do, I just don't feel like it covers quite enough of the yellow. So I'm going to trace this on the background, but I'm going to leave space around it. Normally I would say trace it right on the edge so you don't waste the paper. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this. I knew something was bugging me about it. I'll make sure that it's not like that for you guys, but you've got some options. So if you end up with your template and you're like, I feel like it's great, I love it, leave it alone. If you don't, and you want to make it a little bit bigger, just trace around it and make it, again, a little bit like wonky. But I'm just cutting like basically following it, but following it about an inch away. Okay. Yeah, see, for me, that's better. If you like this the way that it is, totally leave it alone. Don't feel like you have to change it. But I'm wanting to have a little bit bigger one. That's just my personal preference. Okay. And that's what it all comes down to is like, what do you like? What do you like the way that it looks? And for me, that's what I like. So to make this easy, I'm going to start gluing down my little guy. because he's all in one piece on this background. These little scallops here are going to be the tricky part. But once we get that down, it's like super, super easy. Okay, so it's time to glue. Now remember, I said you're going to always start at the back. So if you'll notice, my stem and my leaf are the back because it actually goes underneath my flower. So I'm going to pick this whole section up and set it aside. And then I'm going to go ahead and all I'm going to do is the same thing I did on the background. I'm just going to move this a little. I'm not going to take it off the whole thing so I can remember exactly where it was. Okay, so then I know, okay, that is where I want my stem. So I'm going to put it all down, coat over the top, just like that. And then just kind of give myself a little space to stick down my leaf, coat over the top, and we're on our way. Okay, same thing. Now you could pick up the back of your flower and paint the back of your flower with glue. For me personally, that is not the best way to do it. I like to just kind of give myself a little space right here. And I know I want it to be a little bit low. Press it down into the glue and then a coat over the top. Okay, so everything gets a coat on the bottom and then a coat on the top. And the great thing about putting a coat on the top of this is it serves as the bottom coat for this piece. So you stick it right down. This actually goes pretty quickly once you get the hang of it. Ends up being really pretty easy. And it doesn't even end up being super messy. Stick that down. The only thing that I sometimes see people forget is they forget to put the coat on the top. And so you really can't do that because it seals it down, and that's what's going to keep it from falling off your canvas. I've made a lot of these in a lot of years, over the years, and I've never had one come apart or fall off or anything, which is so great. Okay, so now this one is tricky. And in some ways, you almost have to rebuild what you've already created, which, yes, is kind of a pain in the butt. I will admit to you, it is. However, we can very gently take things out of the way, very gently move things. And the reason that I do this is because I really want to remember exactly where it goes. And yes, I'm kind of particular about it, but once you set it up and you know where it goes, you sure don't want to move it. I'm going to put the darker end on the bottom. Okay, so then I'm just going to, see how I'm holding this down with my left hand? And I'm just going to peel it up because I didn't get the glue all the way under. This is the trickiest part of this. It's just not moving everything so that you can get the glue down, okay? Just put the glue down. Don't let it press down too much or you won't be able to get, it'll glue that big pink piece all the way down. And you don't want to do that yet. You want to get all your petals down first. So I'm going to do the leaf first. Same thing. I'm just painting the glue right on the background, sticking it down, painting it over the top. Now I always tell people to be real careful of your seams, which are just your edges. I guess I could call them edges, right? Duh. So be careful of your edges. You don't want your edges to peel up. Okay, now here's the tricky part. We are going to just start building these scallops. I don't want you to move the pink piece if you can help it at all, because you could end up, if this was not here, you could end up with a really funky looking flower. So you want to use that. You want to keep it there. It's just sort of a guideline. If you want to move these out of the way so you have less to deal with, totally fine. But I would keep this piece just as a guide, because otherwise you may start putting petals in here and then you're going to have to recut everything because it's not going to fit. Okay, so I know it goes there. And I'm just going to start building all the way around. So just watch. I'm going to move them out of the way a little bit because I know what order they go in and I know where they go and everything like that. That's not the question. The question is just how far do I tuck them underneath the pink part, right? To make sure, and at what angle, because they're not all the same. And you're going around a curve. So you might need to get a little bit of help with this. You might feel like, oh my goodness, I can't hold on to both at the same time. My hands aren't big enough. Totally fine. Ask for a little bit of help. but I bet you can do this yourself. I'm betting. I believe in you. I do. Okay, coat on the top, coat on the bottom. I did not get enough on the bottom of that one. So if you don't get enough on the bottom, just peel it back, put a little more under there, and then you'll move it out of the way like I just did by accident. If you do that, just stick a finger on it right there and then paint the glue over top, and then it won't, you know how sometimes it sort of skids around because it's, I don't know, it's like slippery, and you just kind of got to pay attention to that so it doesn't happen. It only seems to happen when you're putting, like right now there's a lot of glue underneath. So if I just go swipe it, it's going to go away. So just want to dab it. Nice and careful. Oops. So just take your time here. Once again, you do not have to hurry. You're not in a hurry here. Oops. I don't want to get too much of that gel medium, but you can go all the way around. Just lay that down lightly. Make sure that it fits. Make sure that it still works where you've got it, okay? Because you don't, you know, the worst thing would be like to have a petal that's sticking out like that. Like, I don't know if you guys can see that. This one right here. And you can tell it's not fully under the pink part. And that's what I'm trying to get you to avoid, okay? That's why you keep that pink thing right there. Keep the big, or whatever color yours is. Keep that big circle there so you can just build around nice and easy, okay? Here again. Oh, watch what you're doing, Courtney. Just tap it down. Okay. I am an incredibly clumsy person. So a lot of times, like if anyone's going to spill their water, it's me. Their paint water with paint in it. It's going to be me. So if you're that way, you may need to be doubly careful. Not a big deal. The other thing you can do, and I often forget this, but you can turn this around. Like if it's easier for you to work with it here and go around, turn it around. You do not have to keep it upright the whole time. And I think for the longest time, I completely forgot that I could do that. So I'm just making sure that it fits. I'm just lining it up nice and even with the one next to it, making sure that it fits on there nice and easily, and then dabbing it down, dabbing the pink one down to make sure that it's tucked underneath at the right angle, okay? And sometimes you might just have to take them right off because they get in the way and they get stuck on the brush and they're kind of got a mind of their own. See, now this one, you just kind of got to turn it, make sure that it stays under that circle. Really, really easy to not do that. And I know this seems kind of tedious, this part, but this is what kind of makes it more interesting, I think, because none of these petals are the same size. They're all a little different. They're all a little unique. And you know, I kind of feel like that's the whole point. All of our art is a little different and a little unique. And I love that. I love that we all kind of have our own perspective. So there again, making sure that now it's probably starting to stick in some places. It should peel right back up without any problem. I'm not really that worried about that. Sometimes if you take things off and like work on them on the table, I don't know if you've had this experience. I sure have. I will glue things accidentally right down to the table. So you do have to be kind of careful. You do have to kind of pull things up, make sure that you're not doing that. So I'm just going to get enough glue there. Peel that back. Make sure that that's the way that I want it. And I'm on my last petal and I just moved the petal before. So sometimes, okay, I just painted it on and moved it completely the wrong way. So you can just peel it right back up and stick it right back down. Annoying? Yes. Ruined? Not a chance. Really hard to make mistakes at this. Okay, so now what you're left with is just a big open circle, okay? Which is kind of cool, to be honest. so now you need to get this big piece glued down. So I'm going to do the same thing. Go right in there. Be generous, okay? Do not be stingy with your glue, although if you're using Mod Podge, it's not quite as thick as this, so it can be really easy to puddle that on, and you don't want everything to look like you can't see anything because there's so much glue on it. That's not what you're going for. You still want to be able to see all the different pieces, okay, through it, meaning it's not such a thick coat that it covers everything up. That would be very thick. But like I said, it's a balance, because if it's not thick enough, then it doesn't stay down. It's got a mind of its own. Okay, so there again, I got a coat on the bottom and then I did a coat on the top. So now that's my bottom coat for my yellow one. Same thing. Just going to glue that down. And even though, yes, only your edges really need to be stuck down, you put the glue over top of the whole piece of paper. You want it to look consistent, and you just don't want it to peel up for any reason. Okay? Same thing here. I do wish this pink was a little bit darker, but that's okay. I actually kind of like it. Okay. So now all my pieces are glued down, but let me explain something. You're still wet, like your glue is still wet. So this is a great time to take out your words, okay? So you have these word sheets. These are just words that I love. These are words that mean something to me. Several of them mean something to me, mean something to the kids that I work with, or from me for the kids that I work with. So what I really want you guys to do is to take a minute, and maybe you do this, at the very beginning. Maybe this is part of setting everything out. Look at the things that mean something to you. Okay? So as I'm looking through this, I'm going to find the things that mean something to me. Okay? And those are the ones I'm going to cut out. Now, you're just going to don't circle them, don't make big marks on them, because they won't look as clean. You just want to cut them out. Okay, I like be yourself, always be yourself. I'm going to kind of go with that theme a little bit. And what I do is I cut that out, and I like to cut them out a word at a time. So my center, I'm not 100% sure. You know what? I'm actually going to move that. I get really funky about the words. I like these words, but I kind of want something a little bit longer here. So see, no mistakes. I'm just going to set them aside because I might use them somewhere else on the paper or on the canvas. But I think what I want to do